It's obviously been an unbelievable 24 hours. I still feel like I'm in a bit of shock, but I don't really know where to start with Dan, because unlike some of the other teams that have a lot of history with Dan and years of exposure to Dan, I've only been around him in a concentrated fashion for probably the last 6 months leading up to the Indy 500 and since that time. And I can tell you from that little bit of experience that he was just an unbelievable individual. In the car, I honestly don't know that I've ever met, more of a fierce competitor. His approach to the month of May and subsequently the results are, if you spend time with him, it really is not a shocker. He understands the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the Indy 500, probably as good as any driver I've ever met, namely Rick Mears. He just has an intellect and an approach to it that's unbelievable. But what was really not normal for a professional driver is the fact that he was willing to share it day in and day out with his teammates. We did, 3 drivers, 3 teams, 3 sets of engineers every morning leading up to the Indy 500, and he was extremely open about the whole process. And I think that's a good example of, why he was so loved in the paddock, is the fact that he got along with everybody off the track, and was such a fierce competitor on the track. He had the respect of every driver out there, which is not always the case. And then, but more importantly than that, I got to know Dan away from the track, and his just sheer and utter love for his family, his wife and his kids was on his brain all the time, and that was really, developed a lot of respect for him in that fashion. And then also, now I take a lot of time to sit back and watch people, because they won't let me turn a wrench, but sit back and watch. And Dan was, let's face it, I mean, it's a busy sport. There's a lot going on. You have a lot of demands, and a lot of times those get old. For Dan, it never got old. I mean, he was a total professional out of the car. He would go out of his way, to sign autographs, to put a smile on a kid's face, to help the disabled. It wasn't an act. And I think a lot of times in professional sports it might be an act, but it was not an act for Dan, and that was truly special, a special part of Dan as well. Just that he had this energy, and everybody wanted to be around him, and everybody wanted to spend time with him, and it wasn't false. It was very genuine, and I have a lot of memories from the last 6 months, before, during, and after the 500, and also leading up to this event. Dan was really, really up for this GoDaddy challenge, and we spent a lot of time preparing, and the odds obviously were not for him, and favor starting dead last and getting to the front. But he, right before he got in that car, he was totally confident in the car and the personnel and preparation, and thought he could win it. He wanted to, more than himself, he wanted to make one lucky fan an instant millionaire, and he kept talking about that. And his last words on the radio were, I'm ready to go for this thing. We can win this thing. And that was his spirit, and that's what I'll remember. It's just hard to put it into words. I mean, the roller coaster this year from Brian and his team winning the 500, and us being a part of that effort, and just having a particularly good season to to this situation is just yeah. And guys all went home this morning, and I'm sure it's just going to be a terrible couple weeks here for sure.
Just talk about what.
Like I said, I hadn't had the pleasure of him, driving for me as an owner prior to the involvement at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, but he was methodical, he was calculating, he studied the history of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and why guys won 4 times and why guys didn't win at all. And he had it dialed. I mean, he had that place down, and I know from personal experience, you either do well there and you love it, or it's intimidating and you never do well there and you hate it. And he was definitely the former, and every bit as good as anybody I've ever met at that place.
Obviously not much.
Well, it's one thing if you take the risk yourself and you assume the risk, and I'm blessed to survive my accident and got to see my kids grow up. But even then, it's more difficult on them than it is on me. I mean, my day isn't great, but it wasn't my kids' dream for me to race the Indy 500. It wasn't my wife's dream, so it was my dream, And so I took the risk, but unfortunately, the result of the risk is everybody else having to pay for it. And it's the same type of situation for Dan. Again, I don't think he has any regrets. I think he was going to win that race and win that, $2.5 million for a fan, and I mean, it would just, would have made his year, and in addition to the Indy 500. And so that's all he was thinking about. That's all he was focused on. But now there's all this, collateral situation. And, me, I was the team owner when Davey Hamilton got hurt at Texas in 2001. And I had only been an owner for 6 months, and I really just thought at that time, man, do I really want to be an owner when this type of tragedy had happened? But I think at that time, it was a different time in my life because I felt like I needed to find something to do, and I needed to kind of get back on the horse type of thing. And then at the end of the day, Davey Hamilton talked me into staying, being a team owner, because he said, hell, if I wasn't driving for you, I'd be driving for somebody else. And, so he kind of got me back on the horse. And, just recently, then you go through the Paul Dana thing in 2006 and watch that happen. Wasn't the owner, but it's still tragic. And then, more recently, the loss of a crew member, and it's just, I'm a little worn out, to say the least, mentally and everything else. And what's important now is the family and the guys on the team and just everybody that was touched by Dan. I think we've obviously seen how large that group is.